And Tom Forte, Maxim Group senior consumer internet analyst, has a hold rating, $201 price target on Apple. What are your expectations here, Tom?
Yeah, so when you think about Apple's guidance for the September quarter, they guided to mid-single digit to high single-digit revenue growth. So clearly, even before they announced the new iPhone 17 lineup, they expected a strong performance. I think what's interesting from a tariff standpoint is they did take $100 a price on the Pro model, introduced a new product, the Air, at $999, which I think is a precursor to a foldable phone in the future, but otherwise held price on all the other models, suggesting that they're really not leaning into price to mitigate the impact of tariffs.
So explain what your hold and $201 price target is all about, where the hesitation for you comes in.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of geopolitical risk in Apple and also competitive risk. So on the geopolitical front, you have the over-reliance from a supply chain standpoint, not only on China, but also on India. So a lot of times we focus the geopolitical risk on China, but we don't think enough about India. Use the proxy of India being a large importer of Russian oil, and I do think that there's some geopolitical risk on the heavy involvement there. And then on a competitive front, you're seeing very significant competition within China. Think of Huawei and others. So that would be, I would say that the current share price reflects a lot of good news, and that's why I have a hold rating right now.
And there's also this AI story and the sort of like lack of a more concrete AI narrative, which I think has kept investors back from Apple versus some of the other Mag 7 names. Is there new AI features in these new phones that will be a driver? What's your feeling about that?
Yeah, so Sarah, I think the challenge for Apple when it comes to artificial intelligence is, let's look at Apple being slow to having a foldable phone. So historically, when it comes to hardware, Apple wasn't always the first, but they were ultimately the best. But I definitely think that when it comes to artificial intelligence, it's hard to envision that Apple being slow to artificial intelligence will one day lead to Apple being the best in artificial intelligence. So yeah, I think the artificial intelligence story for Apple right now, I think shares are a little optimistic in that regard.
There is an interesting, we're fascinated, Tom, by this this would-be race between Apple and OpenAI and Johnny Ive and whatever device they may have in the works. There's an item on the information today saying that OpenAI has been rating Apple for hardware talent, not just software talent, and that they're targeting their first device in late 26 or maybe early 27. Do you think there's the likelihood of new competition coming out of nowhere?
So from a hardware standpoint, I'm not overly concerned about Johnny Ive's involvement with OpenAI. I am concerned about Meta platforms. So I do think that they're doing much better than Apple when it comes to Vision Pro versus Oculus. And then I think they are starting to get some traction, for example, with their smart glasses, things of that nature. The question is, in the future, how important will the smartphone be from a hardware standpoint? It's still very important today. But I would say on a hardware point, I'm watching Meta platforms more than I'm watching OpenAI.
Really? So you think we might be slowly graduating from a phone in the hand to a true wearables environment?
I think we're definitely more in that direction than we've been in the past. But again, if you look at Apple, half their revenue is still the iPhone. So they're still doing amazingly well exploiting the smartphone opportunity.
What about some of the other features, the AirPods, for instance, the hypertension feature on Apple Watches available on the update? Where do you stack the innovation level right now?
So I thought, Sarah, the most innovative thing in their iPhone 17 launch relates to the AirPods. And I feel bad for every teacher who's teaching a foreign language. But if we're all just going to sit down and put the AirPods in and have everything translated for us, that's heavily using machine learning. I thought that was easily the most innovative thing Apple announced.
Does it move the needle, though, on revenues?
It doesn't move the needle on revenue, but I think that on a relative basis, it's a higher margin or a high margin category. So I think it's good in that regard. The real needle mover is the services. So as long as Apple's able to continue to grow that at a relatively faster rate than the hardware, that's still part of the good story for Apple.
Right. It is remarkable, Tom. I mean, you think back a couple of months maybe where there literally were calls on the street for the board to reconsider Cook's employment, calls for his dismissal or whatever because they felt the AI story was severely lagging. My question to you is on India and whether or not the street has good visibility on that production, that supply, and hence those costs.
I think there's good visibility, perhaps less visibility than there is in China. But again, my concern, Carl, is that we're not talking about iPhones made in Mexico. So we can debate, if ultimately an iPhone will be assembled in the U.S. But I think that having iPhones made in, China, India, and even to a lesser extent Vietnam, it poses challenge for Apple.
Well, it has had a nice run up in the last 3 months, up 22% or so, but is down year to date, lagging the overall market. Tom, thanks for talking us through it.
I think the run-up, Sarah, is on the improving news out of China. So you talked earlier about the potential for TikTok U.S. deal. So while I think the relations between China and U.S. government are still strained, you are seeing movement forward on ways for the two countries to work together, and that is good news for Apple.
Yes. No, the market loves the dialogue, the conversations that are literally happening this morning between Trump and Xi. Tom, thank you.